Hello and welcome to another episode of the MBSE podcast. It is almost the end of the year, and this one will be the last podcast episode in 2024, but don't worry, we will continue the podcast in 2025, of course. This time we don't have a guest, my co-host Christian is my guest, so
More
we
or
can skip
less.
the introduction of the guest. And well, he brought a topic with him that he has been carrying around, I think, for some time, so for several months, years. He
Years.
has often told me, yes, yeah, that this would be a great topic for a podcast. So here we are. And well, simply said, it's about whole-part relationships. Sounds simple, but it isn't simple. Christian sent me a paper about it. It is about meronymics relationships. So I have to admit that I had to use a translator to translate the term meronymic to German. And well, and then I had to Google again to understand the German term, which I didn't know either. But now I think I have a guess what it is. So, but that's a good starting point for a podcast. That the host has no idea, and his guest provides the answers with all his knowledge. And so, Christian, how did you come up with the idea of this topic, and what kind of paper is it?
Yeah, I guess it has to be at least 5 years ago,
Oh,
maybe more. It was definitely pre-pandemic, and I was at an OMG meeting, and I remember standing around in a coffee break with Conrad Bock from NIST, and I guess Ed Seidewitz was also part of the discussion round, and a bunch of other people. And Conrad brought up his knowledge about different types of whole and part relationships, and I was listening. And as I learned from this talk, that the theory behind it, or one theory behind it, is rather old. And Conrad pointed out that he has a paper on his website, conradbock.org, referencing this original paper from Winston, and it's from 1987 or something like that. And
so before SysML and before UML.
Exactly.
So completely independent of the modeling languages. No?
Exactly.
Mhm.
Yeah, and this guy, or also the other guys who brought up the next paper, thought about what are the different types of whole-part relationships and how can you separate them from each other. And they came up an interesting table, and I guess Tim has prepared it also for you here, for the
Yeah.
viewers, for the viewing people. We have also linked the paper in the show notes. It is freely available from Wiley or somewhere. Yeah, just follow the link. And we will talk about it a little bit more in detail, as far as we can describe it.
Yeah, it's tough. It's not simple as it looks like on the first glance. But before we dive into this table, why is it critical in systems engineering? So why do we talk about this here in an MBSE podcast?
Yeah, so you can even enlarge the question and say, why is it critical for engineers? So, and in engineering, you rather always have, in daily business, you have to do with part-whole relationships. If you are a mechanical engineer, you have a bill of material, which is a whole-part relationship. If you are an electrical engineer and you design some schematics, your resistor is part of a PCB. It's a whole-part relationship in some matter, or in some manner. And even if you're looking from a systems perspective, you see that systems are inherently hierarchical. It is there by nature, this hierarchical structure. And even talking about structure says in an abstract way that, yeah, something has a structure means there is something below or above, and so you again have a whole part relationship.
Okay, so then let's dive into this table. So this table shows 3 different kinds of relation elements and 6 different types of relations. So that's a lot. And well, as Christian said, I have prepared the table. So give me a minute. No, here it is. And now I have to go there. So there's the table, and you see there the 3 relation elements, function, homogeneous, and separable. And here we have the 6 relationship types.
Exactly.
So let's start with the relation element kinds. So what is functional and this homogeneous? I think that's how it's spoken correctly, and separable.
Yeah. So functional is when the 2 elements, from which one is the whole, the other one is the part, when they have a functional relationship. And we will see in different examples later that in some cases it's absolutely obvious that something has a functional relationship to each other, and in other cases there is no functional relationship between a whole and a part. And
well, here's an example. Here's a plus sign.
Exactly.
And a handle is a part of a cup. So a handle cup relationship is functional, right?
Exactly. Yeah. If you separate, and we are coming to a separation in a minute. If I have a cup here, and if I take off the handle, which has the function that I don't burn my hands on the hot coffee, then I have a useless handle and a. Is it also a cup or a mug? I think the correct word is a mug. I have a mug where I can burn my hands. So the composition is definitely functional.
Okay. And yeah, we are there in the middle, separable. Let's skip this in the middle, but here's also a plus.
Yeah, exactly.
So what does that mean?
That means that I can take off the handle. It's no problem to take off the handle. Yeah, it is. In this case, it's no screw. And if I separate the handle from the mug, I have I have crashed it. Yeah. So it's separable but not assemblable. I can't make an assembly out of it again. Instead of another example we will see later in the place area in the last line, I can't. I cannot take. What was the best example?
An oasis is part of a desert.
Yeah, oasis is part of a desert. I can't dig out the oasis and put it to another place. It's not separable. That's not possible. Instead of the handle from the mug.
So I can physically take the composition apart.
Exactly. Yeah, it's mostly about physical compositions. Yeah.
Okay, so we have the functional and the separable, and the third one is this homogeneous thing. What does it mean?
Exactly. So homoeomeric is it has Greek roots. So homo, something is the same, it's similar, and meric from the same kind, so to say. So the things are uniform to each other. This is pretty good example that we see here is the slice and pie. So if I take a slice from my pie, both is pie. I have the slice of pie and I have the rest of the pie, but both is pie. They are the same thing. Instead of again taking my cup here, a handle and a mug is not the same thing. It's something different.
Okay, like a piece of sand and the whole sand. So
Exactly.
something like this. Things like that. Okay. Okay, now we have the three relation element kinds. Now we have 6 types of relations. So let's go through them. And start with the first one. Component object is the name in the paper. So what's component object? But that's the example. No?
Yeah, that was the first
Uh,
example, and I guess it's pretty obvious if you take this cup, and I think it's true for many physical things. For many physical things even in engineering. But we will see a good example later where we can discuss if it's really composite object or not. And yeah, as we have seen, we have this functionality. If I attach this handle to the mug, I don't burn my fingers. It's not the same. It's not homomeric, but I can take it apart. I can rip it apart once, and this is why it's separable. Yeah, and I think this is
so these 3 relation element kinds, they define the relation, right? No,
exactly.
that's my thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if here is plus minus plus, then it's always component object. No? So there's it's unique in the whole table.
Exactly.
The combinations of these 3. Okay.
That's true.
All right. Yeah, that's the typical whole part relationship. I think.
Yeah, I think
most
that's the
engineers
most natural.
think in those kinds of relationships. Yeah.
Yeah.
And well, in SysML v2 or even SysML v1, it's the composite relationship, right?
Yeah, I would say this is clearly the composite relationship. Yeah.
All right. Next one is called the member collection. So remember, the paper is before UML, SysML. So it's, these are no SysML terms. It's from the paper. It's minus minus plus, so not functional, not homeomeric, and it's separable.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's similar to the cup example, but it's missing its functionality part. And a well-known example is pulling out of a tree of a forest. Yeah, so the tree is a member of the forest, of the collection of many trees, then it's called forest. And if you take out one tree, it has no functional composition. So we can discuss if you take you have 10 trees and you take one of it, if you have a functional composition or not, but this is really more a philosophical discussion.
Maybe it's by law. I think if I remember correctly, here where I live, 10 trees are a forest. So.
That's why we are because we are in Germany.
We are in Germany. Yes, of course it's defined. So if you have 9 trees, it's not a forest.
It's not a forest anymore. Yeah, but even then, the question is there or was there a functional relationship between the 9 trees and the 10th tree? By giving shadow, by I don't know what. So, but if you're thinking of a big forest, just taking out one member of these many trees, it has no functional relation to each other. But it's separable. Obviously, I can take out a tree out of the forest.
And it's not homoemeric because, well, a tree does not look like a forest, no? No?
Yeah, so to say. Yeah. Also,
okay.
To discuss, yeah, but.
And this is not it's not a technical example. Do we have a technical example? So technical system with a member collection relationship?
Oh, good question. Do you have one?
No, typical consultant. Throw the answer back. No, not at the moment. I have to think about it.
Yeah.
Interesting.
I think we're coming back to it if we come to the special example from Axel.
Yes.
We discussed before.
Okay. Then to the next one. It's minus plus plus, so it's not functional, but it's homomeric and it's separable.
Yeah, and
it's called portion mess.
Portion mass, really, exactly. And this was the example we had before with a slice and a pie, and a whole pie. And yeah, apart from the function that a whole pie doesn't dry out as instead of picking out one piece. Okay, there we can discuss if it's functional, that something is in stays in its whole. But not no matter what, you take out a slice of pie, both is pie. Or you take a pizza, for example. Yeah, the slice is pizza, the rest is also pizza. So it's homomeric, definitely. And it's separable. I can cut out one piece of pizza. It's no problem for me. Yeah. And that's why we have this minus plus plus in the table for this kind.
Okay, so if you would model this with SysML v2, it's probably something where you maybe as an attribute about the capacity of something. You have a tank full of gasoline, and the capacity measures the amount of gasoline in there. Something like that, maybe.
Yeah.
Okay. Then we have minus minus plus, so not functional, not homomeric. It was also a minus.
It's also minus, isn't it?
Three minus, no? It's
three
small.
minuses. Yeah.
Okay, nothing. Yeah.
Yeah, nothing.
The example is steel is part of a bike.
Exactly. Yeah. And if we have a look into this example, if we see how the steel and the steel of the bike and the bike itself stand to each other, it's not a functional relationship. I see no function between the steel itself and the bike. So it's not the frame; it's the steel, the material that we're talking about. It's not homomeric. So a piece of steel or pile of steel is not a bike, definitely not, and it's not separable. You can't say I have a bike, I separate out the steel. That's impossible. Then you have some pieces of plastic left, or of aluminum or whatever, but it's not a bike anymore, so it's not separable. Which is true for many of these material examples.
Yeah, in a language like SysML, it's probably not a real relationship there. So in the sense that there's a line on the diagram, it's probably a property. No, they have a bike frame, and the property is material and the value is steel, something like that.
Yeah,
also,
no? Yeah. Another example that you often find is a mixture of liquids. That you say, I have my vodka martini, and I want to separate out the vodka, gin. Or in a regular martini, the gin. It's not separable anymore. You cannot pick any atom or whatever from the gin out of the mixed liquid. It's not separable anymore. It has also no function apart from making you drunk. And a drink and an ingredient is also not homomeric. It's not the same level of abstraction, so to say.
But if you have beer and you remove the alcohol, then you have an alcohol-free beer. It changes the function.
In this case.
Okay. Speaking of functions, the next one is about functions. Feature activity is the name. And it's only functional. It's not homomeric and it's not separable. And the example is paying as part of shopping.
Yeah, exactly. So very often you find this kind of decomposition in activities. So if you're going to shop, paying is mandatory. You can't separate both from each other. Yes, both is you can say I'm paying now and not later, but paying is one part of the whole shopping experience, so to say. It's the one of the last parts of shopping, but it's mandatory. You can't separate it from each other. If you do so, you're a shoplifter. And
so it's not separable.
Yeah, and it's not homomeric. So going through a store, picking a trouser is something different than paying. Not the same. But it's definitely functional. So it's behaving good if you're paying and leave the shop.
So if we map this to SysML, it's probably like SysML V1, the activity with actions, or the same in SysML V2 with action defs, with the action usages, something like that. No?
Yeah.
So the decomposition of the functions.
Exactly. Yeah.
Something. Okay. And the last one is minus plus minus, which means it's not functional, it's not separable, but it's homomeric. Place area. Yeah, we also already had that example. It's,
we had this example.
Oasis is part of that.
Yeah, and I think it gets even more clear if we say I cannot separate out the Everglades from Florida. So it's both an area, it's a place, and they belong together. They have no functional relationship. It's not hotter, cooler, nicer, whatever in the Everglades instead of the rest of Florida, but they belong together. They are something of the same kind. It's both an area. It's just another zoom factor on Google Maps, so to say. Yeah, and you can't separate it. You can't pick out the Everglades and place it in California. It's impossible.
Okay, so, well, I think on one side it's pretty clear. On the other side, each column here in the middle, you can argue against it. No? So it's Everglades and Florida is really homomeric. So it's no, these are two completely different things. So there's no, and also the other one. I think that makes it a little bit tricky with this taxonomy here.
Absolutely, and we
always get an argument against it.
Yeah, and we're looking forward to your comments here under the video or on the other platforms. We are pretty curious what you think about it, and where you have another example or maybe even another relationship kind or another theory how to divide the kinds of whole part relationships.
And now the Excel example. So Excel is a colleague of mine, and here's a good example. It's modeling challenge. So you have a car. A car is a door, and you have a loudspeaker which is in the door. So that's pretty easy. Car, composite part, door part, loudspeaker. But the loudspeaker is also part of the audio system. But it cannot be part of two systems at the same time. So it's part of the door system or the car system, and it's part of the audio system. So that's an issue. Can we solve it here with our table?
It's complicated, so to say. So from an engineer's point of view, I could say, or from a PLM guy's point of view, I would say there is a bill of material, and as you already described, the door is part of the chassis, and there is a pre-assembly line where the loudspeaker gets built in the door. So from this point of view, it's a composite object relationship between the door and the loudspeaker. On the other hand,
and between between the door and the loudspeaker.
Yeah.
And the audio system and the loudspeaker.
Yeah, this is definitely.
Is it also separable or not? We have 3 separable ones, no? Yes, 3.
Yeah, coming from this point of view, and it's taking a closer look to the table. Composite object requires a functional relationship to each other, and it's really hard to argue what functional relationship the loudspeaker has in comparison to the door, or in relation to the door. So you could also argue that it's just a member collection relationship in the second line of the table, because it's not really functional, apart that the door holds the loudspeaker in place. It's not the same. A door is not a loudspeaker, and the other way around, but it's separable. I can take it apart. I can reassemble it. So in this case, maybe the bill of material point of view is even more a member collection view.
Right. But the wording is then a little bit weird, no? A member of a collection or group. So the loudspeaker is a member of the group door. It's a little bit weird, but it's not wrong. Yeah, okay, makes sense. And you're right, it has nothing to do with the functional thing. So between loudspeaker and door is then more a member collection, and between loudspeaker and audio system, it's a component object thing. Huh?
Exactly, because they have definitely a functional relationship to each other. And you have a signal flow between them, which gives you also an idea that it's somehow functional. And this brings us to the problem that, like Tim mentioned, or did you mention it, or did you discuss it before, that SysML does not allow you to have multiple, at least not multiple compositions, composite relationships.
So not multiple owners. No? So if you're a composite part, you cannot have multiple owners.
Yeah. Would it be?
But then the loudspeaker is a composite part of the audio system. That's composite, a component object with the first line. And, it's a reference relationship to the door. The door references it.
Yeah, that would be a solution if we say member collection can be modeled as a reference. Yeah.
And then, we have different models. That's another dimension. No? So in the SysML model, the door references the loudspeaker, but in the CAT model, it owns it. It's another kind of model, and there we I think we can use then other whole part relationships. It's
yes and no. So very interesting thought, but I have a problem if I really want to realize the model-driven architecture, and I do some kind of model transformation in direction CAT model. Is it working? Or how do I describe this model transformation that it gets another kind of...
Function has a different meaning then. So on the system level, it's the system functionality, and in the CAT model, it's the pure mechanical functionality, and then the loudspeaker maybe plays an important role in the door.
Yeah, and maybe it's just a transitivity problem. Yeah, that's another point we have to talk about.
Yeah, that's a little bit back to practice, huh? Maybe. But that's then could lead to practical issues. So what's the transitivity problem?
The transitivity problem describes if you have a chain of composite relations, and or in this case a chain of whole part relationships, if you can also declare that something in the end of the chain is still part of of the whole, of the first element of the chain. And there are interesting examples which show that in some cases this is true, and in some cases it does not make sense.
So if the car, a part of the car is the door, and let's assume the loudspeaker is part of the door, then the loudspeaker is also part of the car, which makes sense. That's
Which
correct, no?
definitely makes sense, yeah.
And so forth. And the screws in the loudspeaker and so forth, they're also part of the car.
Exactly.
And part of the bill of material. Yeah. The whole tree.
Yeah, yeah. But there are interesting examples like a student is a member of a department, and a department is part of the university, but the student is not part of the university. So
No, the student is more a customer of the university. No?
so to say, yeah, exactly. And
or more obvious, this finger is which is pointing all the time at the wrong place. It's part of me, so it's a component object thing. No? I think it's no, it's not it's separated, but it's functional and it's not homomeric. So it's a component object relationship. This finger is part of Tim, and Tim is a member of OSE, but the finger is not a member of OSE. No?
It's not a part of OSE. Yeah. And this is an interesting thought, and we had in both examples, I guess, or in all three examples now, that this transitivity only takes place or is only relevant for cases where you have similar or the same relationship type. We said the door is part of the car, the loudspeaker is part of the door, and then you have this transitivity. But two times we said the one thing is member of the other thing, and the one is part of something else. That is already a sign that transitivity might not be applicable. On the other hand, when I think about your example, no, the finger is no member of you.
In my example,
it's the same.
That's component object, and I to my company is member collection.
Exactly.
So the issue is that I change the relationship kind, and then I cannot apply the transitivity. Maybe that's the rule. Is it a rule mentioned in the paper that transitivity is not allowed if the chain has different relationship kinds?
I'm not remembering that, but maybe it's even in there. Yeah. We have to read it up again.
It's more practical. Well, the paper is very theoretical, but a practical consequence is if you do automatic analysis of your model, and you rely on this transitivity, and a machine uses this transitivity, but it's wrong because you have this transitivity problem. So if you have not a clear chain of your part relationships, and you use this for automatic analysis, then you could get wrong results.
And we have an interesting comment here in the live chat from Heiko, and he says, to make it even more challenging, the speaker needs the door to work properly. In example, the door is also part of the audio system. It makes it more complicated, but in some cases I can see the issue. Yeah, maybe you need the outer sheet of the door that the loudspeaker is working properly. Interesting
he wrote a low frequency loudspeaker will not work without the housing, which is the door in this case. Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, I think it's the same with hearing aids. Everything is connected there.
Interesting thought. Before this podcast, we already discussed about it. And Tim, you had another interesting thought that maybe the viewpoint or the abstraction layer might change. That in a functional or a logical point of view, you have different whole part relationships instead of the physical view. So that could also be a solution to this node you have in your head, or we have in our head.
Yeah, I think it's another important thing you must consider, the different kind of abstraction or different kind of models. And also what I said before, is a system model and a CAD model, electrical model, software model. I think that also has an impact on how to categorize a relationship here in the table. Oh, there's another comment. From Google's AI overview about homoemerus. Homoemerus means having similar parts or quantities or being the same, whether divided into parts or whole. So like the slice and pie thing.
Yeah, it's a good definition of homoemerus. Yeah. I asked ChatGPT some days ago, and it gave a similar
again,
answer.
A little bit this example here at the table with this an oasis is part of a desert. It's I think it's a little bit, I'm not sure if it's good to have a plus here, but it's more or less from the paper. It's a different example. The paper has the example with Everglades in Florida, but it's the same.
Yeah.
So Everglades is not Florida. Well, maybe
it is.
But it's not so obvious as sly and pie or a piece of sand at the beach and things like that.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, we have well, usually we provide solutions here, no? But we have no solution is just a topic that is interesting.
Yeah, today we have more questions than solutions. Yeah.
And for sure there are solutions out there. People, I guess, know solutions. And if I remember the discussions also with Konrad Bock and Ed Seidowitz, they also have, well, maybe there's not the single solution, but they have a strong opinion about that, as far as I know.
Maybe not the same. Maybe gets a topic on the international workshop in January.
Yeah, the international workshop in January, February in Seville. That's
the Incosi International Workshop.
Yeah, that's all right. So, well, we planned 30 minutes. Now we already talked 40 minutes about this topic.
Yeah.
Before we started the podcast, he said, "Oh, this probably will be a short one."
Plan didn't work out.
Usual length. All right. So, well, it's the last one this year. Next topic is not finally set yet, but we have several ideas for next year. So, of course, we will talk about SysML 2 stuff because SysML 2 will be finally submitted in March. So it's the year of SysML 2. We also plan some AI stuff, some methodology stuff. There's a new standard coming up at the OMG. Last week was an OMG meeting, and the request for proposal for the Cascade standard was officially published. So we will also cover that one. Yeah, and many more. But a year has 12 months, so it's a member collection or month of the year.
Maybe.
So we will have around 12 episodes next year, maybe more. So it's not a strict rule, but that's more or less the plan. So not a fixed topic and also not a fixed date. We plan one in January. So stay tuned for that. And well, then finally, I would say, do not forget.
Trust us. We are systems engineers. Goodbye.
Right. Bye-bye. And happy holidays.